On January the 1st, 1995, the History Channel was officially launched as a basic cable station included in packages across the country. It premiered the exact same month as the Golf Channel, which seems like an odd thing to point out, if not for the fact that it signified a trend in channels with oddly specific programming. While the Golf Channel played golf footage every hour of the day and every day of the week, the History Channel would explore the world's past through a series of television shows and specials. For some time, the History Channel was regarded as a brilliant educational exercise which proved that entertainment with value was possible in modern America. Today, however, the History Channel is seen either as a total oddity or a punchline, so far declined from its initial healthy goals that you would think it was a metaphor for my diet during the quarantine. Meanwhile, the Golf Channel still seems to play nothing but golf to this very day. What happened to history? This was a question I briefly considered covering in my last video before I realized that it was such a hefty topic that it really deserved to be split off and analyzed on its own. And so today, we're going to be taking a look back at the programming of this station as we talk about the good, the bad, and the generally stupid. And this look back is arguably possible thanks to today's sponsor, GlassesUSA.com. For those of you who have been watching this channel for the last 6 months, which also is I think the last time I got a haircut, you'll know that I got this particular pair of glasses from GlassesUSA.com, and I wear them pretty much in every video every week, and that fact is not true out of any obligation, but instead a legitimate pride for the quality and style of these lenses. GlassesUSA.com can save you up to 70% by cutting out the middleman and selling these glasses directly to you. And because of the virtual mirror, you can preview what each pair will look like before you make your purchase. It's really like being in the store, but from the safety of your own home. But wait, Quinton, I hear you saying, I don't have my prescription anymore. How can I buy glasses online? Well, and this is something I almost didn't believe when it was explained to me, you don't need your prescription at GlassesUSA.com. All you have to do is take a few tests with your current lenses and the app will tell you what your prescription is. That's magic right there. We live in the future. Everything's connected. And with this service, you get free shipping and returns and a 100% money-back guarantee. This is the definition of a no-risk purchase. Those are all things that regular glasses shops didn't always offer in the before time. GlassesUSA.com is also offering a special 70% off on all blue light lenses, which are designed to protect our eyes from the harmful light that can be emanated from all the screens we look at on a day-to-day basis. Our phones, our TVs, our laptops, you name it. And all you have to do is use the code BLUE70 at checkout. You can get that on top of a special offer just for fans of this channel right now at the link at the top of the description. Throughout this video, I'm also going to be switching between the many glasses they sent me, so if you find yourself falling in love with any of the frames that I'm wearing in this one, all those will also be linked in the description down below. Seeking out the earliest History Channel programming was a really interesting task. It was neat seeing how these different shows stuck to the basic theme while being totally unique and beyond just having different shows dedicated to different time periods. Inspector Gadget's Field Trip was a 1996 show which featured the character Inspector Gadget exploring different parts of the world. The gimmick being a mix of traditional animation with live-action footage of real locations, similar to the 2004 PBS show Postcards from Buster. History's Lost and Found, meanwhile, would go through various historical items of the past, ones which were once lost, and others which can still be found today. American Eats featured discussions on the history of America's favorite foods, from Spam to canned ravioli. Ancients Behaving Badly was a sensational look at figures in history known for horrible deeds. Forensic Fight Club is a show we won't talk about, and in my personal favorite example, Extreme Trains was about a guy who's really into trains, getting paid to ride them all day, and just showing off his boyish excitement about the fact that his life consists of doing this all the time.
Right here. What it boils down to, it's just like a giant teapot.
However, out of all of these, Modern Marvels probably stands out the most. The show is an exploration into the technology available in the modern age, very similar to How It's Made, but with more emphasis being put on the history of these achievements. Episodes span vastly, from the Eiffel Tower to Kentucky bourbon, each providing a fascinating story and a lot of truth to be discovered. But it should be pointed out that just because something was on History Channel during its golden era doesn't mean that it's actually what I would call good documentary storytelling. And that's usually because they rarely chose to cover more than a surface-level look at the past. Remember when your middle school history teacher would come into class hungover, so she'd put on a documentary she found at the school library and just sort of sit in the dark for a while? That's what these are for. It's textbook storytelling intended to invest you into the past without telling you the bits that make the story uncomfortable. It's Hamilton, the cable channel. It was really annoying when I found a documentary that talked about Andrew Jackson, who is, if you didn't know, one of the worst people in all of history, only to discover that they so quickly glossed over some of the greatest atrocities of his term as if they were simply footnotes to his legacy. It's baffling that someone could literally commit an act of genocide only to have a reflective documentary spend 15 seconds discussing this before spending 20 minutes talking about juicy 19th century drama.
He was the type of man, a complex individual to say the least, as all great individuals are.
This is a personal thing that bothers me that might not bother you, but I think that if you're going to make informative media about the past, you shouldn't purposefully underreport the actions and beliefs of these figures just to make them more likable. If you make a documentary about Thomas Jefferson, and you don't talk about the fact that he raped a 14-year-old, you've made a bad documentary about Thomas Jefferson. These reveal themselves to be the sort of films that think it's more important to remember the names of all the presidents as some sort of glorification of the American empire than to actually understand their contributions to society. But on the other hand, you could argue that from an educational standpoint, there is an importance to that. You could definitely argue that kids probably do need to have a Sesame Street version of history taught to them before they're able to actually learn the hard truths of what really happened. The point is that while it might be more satisfying in a timeline to say that all History Channel content was once the golden standard of journalism and then it just fell off the rails, the truth is that from the very beginning, history featured the sort of content we associate with it, just to a more benign and less comedic degree. If one sees the show Ancient Aliens as a more bloated and exaggerated version of the Unsolved Mysteries UFO segments, then the middle ground between them is Ancient Mysteries, a 1994 History Channel series hosted by Leonard Nimoy.
Perhaps our cosmic visitors were here many times, at the beginning of human history. Perhaps they brought with them a message from the stars that may still lie buried within these stones and ruins.
What would happen if extraterrestrials landed on the White House lawn? I don't think people would panic. I think they'd be more worried about what would happen to the stock market nowadays.
10 years later, in 2004, the network premiered Conspiracy ? A show whose sole purpose in existing was to analyze recent historical events and then make it seem probable that they were all part of some secret scheme. In other words, the channel was platforming conspiracy theories in order to increase ratings. This is a great example of what I talked about in my last video about the motivations of reporting in shows like this. The producers of Conspiracy ? Obviously always had to put forward the conclusion that any event they covered was almost certainly some conspiracy. This is bad informative TV by default. The 2003 show Ancient Discoveries is perhaps the missing piece to the puzzle. The show would go through every known ancient civilization and would cover the great accomplishments of these cultures, as well as likely answers to how these different things were done. The only difference between Ancient Discoveries and Ancient Aliens is that Discoveries would explain that ancient man was actually smarter than we presume, and Aliens would say that ancient man was stupid, and thus their accomplishments are without explanation. However, I think the real thing that caused the content of history to change so suddenly was the sudden obsession cable channels developed with reality television in the mid to late 2000s. So there's this concept that comes attached to a lot of hyper-branded channels that's called network decay. The idea is that as networks struggle to compete over time, their content broadens and broadens until the stations become increasingly homogenized. Entering into the early 2010s, it can be hard to tell if a show was made for History Channel, Discovery, Sci-Fi, Travel Channel, Food Network, The Learning Channel, and even Cartoon Network to some extent, as they all started airing reality TV, which is based around extreme characters doing weirdly specific things. And it feels like such a weird, quick transition from one or two of these shows being on History in 2007 to constantly seeing moments like this anytime I turn the station on today.
Oh, your freaking makeup. You're only 14.
Everyone does it at school.
So you have to look like this to be their friends? You're not gonna do this. You're not gonna go just try and look like them and try and be the cool kids.
You were a cool kid in high school?
I can't help the fact that I was cool. But I didn't have to wear makeup to look cool. I didn't have to fit in.
Well, you are a guy.
I was the guy. I was a dude.
And it's easy to see why networks prefer shows like these. They're cheap to produce, you can make like 3 seasons in a year, you don't need writers, so if there's a strike, you can keep making TV. These people love hamming up to the camera, and they're good at it. And the ratings are almost always killer. These shows don't necessarily demonstrate the end of History Channel being good at history, but their massive success marked the moment where the station sort of shrugged and went, fuck it. And this brings us back around to Ancient Aliens, the phrase, fuck it, personified as 15 seasons of an ongoing TV show. I watched a lot of Ancient Aliens for this video, and let me tell you how not easy that was. Because this stuff rots your brain. The positive is that by absorbing as much as I could, I really was able to understand the show on a more general scale. I know a lot of you will expect this video to be me going through each and every one of the claims they've ever made and debunking them all one by one, but other YouTubers have done that better, and as I'll talk about later, this show is constructed in a way that's pretty much impossible to really debunk just by knocking down a few odd specific arguments. I'm more generally interested in talking about the format and the themes of its own existence. One of the first things I noticed when watching is that the show does this brilliantly deceptive thing, where they tend to mix legitimate sources with total nutjobs during information collages. So they'll interview someone with an Oxford history degree and have them talk about how the Aztecs had an impressive sewer system, and then they'll cut to some sci-fi author with no credentials, and he's the guy who says, "What if that sewer system was built by aliens?" It's essentially the same trick that Tiger King pulls off. Half the people in the documentary are trustable, and this tricks the audience into believing the whole narrative put forward, even if the reputable people only put forward a non-essential piece. And it's when we look into the backgrounds of the essential characters who are interviewed that things become a little more clear. Ancient Aliens presents itself as a documentary trying to reveal the truth about history, but in actuality, it's really a show about mythology, and not ancient mythology, but American middle-class 1950s folklore. Roswell, gray aliens, H.P. Lovecraft to some extent. The goal of these speakers is to make said folklore seem like a total reality, and they have motivation to do that. Most of them are public speakers about UFOs and aliens. They sell books, they go to conventions, they charge you money to take photos with them. Their bank accounts depend on people believing that aliens are real and on Earth. And thus, they'll probably come to the conclusion that anything they see has to be aliens, no matter what. I mean, for God's sakes, the cultures they present in this show aren't even allowed to invent basketball without that being blamed on aliens.
The players would knock a rubber ball through a stone hoop. It's thought that this is a representation of alignments of the sun.
I actually find it hard to disprove a lot of what's said on this show, because when I look into proving or disproving something, I think, what did they say? What did they mean to say? What's their source on that information? But half the time, they just make stuff up on the spot, and I don't know where they're getting any of the things they're saying.
If you take antibiotics and you treat them in the pyramid, the power of the antibiotic was multiplied tens of thousands of times.
Here's an episode where they claim that statues are alive.
Geologists point out that stone is not as lifeless as it might appear.
Rocks and us are made of the same exact thing.
The famous statues on Easter Island were said to be alive, but eventually there was a revolution on Easter Island, and they had to kill the statues. They would snap the neck of the statue. What archaeologists have done today is re-erected them on platforms, put the heads back on. Did these statues actually have some energy or power?
I know you guys want me to do a big deep dive down the rabbit hole here, just presenting a ton of evidence, but what do you expect me to say? Hey, I did 6 months of research overseas, and it turns out the Easter Island heads, they're rocks, apparently. Later on in the same episode, they claim that all of these statues are transport beacons, or maybe internet modems. They can't decide from 1 minute to the next. And again, like, how do you want me to debunk that? How do you want me to debunk that Aztec statues are internet modems? Backtracking a bit, did this dude just claim that all of the Easter Island heads were once knocked over and that archaeologists put them all back up? Do you realize how impossible that is? A lot of the Easter Island heads have been sitting in place so long that the earth has actually risen around them, and those statues have full bodies which almost no one has ever seen. There are other episodes of the show where they talk about this. They've done like 5 episodes about the Easter Island heads, and every time they come to a different stupid conclusion. A lot of times on this show, they talk about the concept of energy, and they never define what energy actually is. Half of the time they just say this item has immense energy, and we're supposed to guess that there's some scientific meaning to that specific phrase, despite the fact that no one seems to have any idea what it means.
Karnak as a place is highly charged with energy. As you walk down these stone corridors, you can feel this charge.
The placement of the pyramids are very interesting because they seem to be placed where the energy is. And I think the ancients understood this very carefully.
I think that these stones are transmitting energy.
The stone statues become vessels of this cosmic energy.
Building a crystal in the exact shape of the human cranium does have some sort of energetic quality.
Ancient Aliens is structured almost exactly like a MatPat video. Now, if you've never seen a MatPat video, if you've never watched Game Theory, let me fill you in on what most of his videos are like. MatPat will set up a potential theory. He'll spend an excessive amount of time explaining what the details of that theory would entail, what it would mean, and at the very moment where you expect him to show any substantial evidence that proves that there is substance to this theory being real in any way, he distracts you with some stupid bullshit. It might be a joke, it might be a tangent, it might be a skit, but when the distraction is over, he just starts over and begins explaining a new theory that also doesn't have any evidence. And it's hard to say that he's lying, because MatPat's videos aren't really theories. They're open-ended questions that are meant to be left up to your imagination. Every guest speaker on this show, except for this guy, usually avoids saying that any idea is actually true, instead simply stating that it might be true, and that's all that really matters.
Is it possible that during the genetic manipulation of human beings, we at one point started out as Sasquatch and Bigfoot and Yetis?
And the answer is a potential yes.
That's why in every single episode, the narrator always says the words,
"Is it possible? Is it possible? Is it possible? Is it possible? But is it possible?"
This is the core gimmick of Ancient Aliens. They never put the burden of proof on themselves, but instead casually glide off the fact that what they are presenting are overwhelmingly unfalsifiable claims. They can't prove themselves right, but I can't prove them wrong. And even if I did go through and pick apart dozens of examples they bring up, the speakers would just fall back on different pieces of evidence.
The way you
prove the ancient astronaut theory is not with one single piece of evidence. It is a conglomeration of different puzzle pieces.
And when you really start to listen to these guest speakers, it's usually pretty obvious that a whole lot of them don't know anything about ancient cultures, and they're just sort of talking out their ass.
He is got a beard and a mustache. And that is an unusual thing because American Indians do not have beards and mustaches.
Exactly. The fact also that the beard and the mustache are so pronounced. They're not little wispy ones, they're major, so.
People are going to be really mad that I pointed this out, but have you ever noticed all the guest speakers on Ancient Aliens are really, white? That's weird, right? Because this show is primarily about analyzing the culture of people of color in ancient history, and yet the only times I ever seem to notice a local being interviewed is to just give basic facts about the area. The locals are never the people claiming that it was actually aliens. The show is still on the air, it's got almost 200 episodes, and they're still making more of them, so I'm sure there are exceptions. But anytime I see it on TV, it's always a white dude describing things that non-white people did, saying that it was impossible for how undeveloped they were, and then saying that it had to be aliens.
How could the Easter Islanders have invented their own writing without some other cultural influence? They're doing things that would require precision work. How could they have had these advanced machining tools? The one answer would have to be they'd gotten it from ancient aliens.
The Mayans could not possibly have developed these systems on their own, so it is clear that they were given to them by aliens out there.
Of course, the ongoing narrative of these moments is clearly a somewhat contradictory lack of respect for these civilizations and their people. Their art is interesting enough to analyze, their accomplishments impressive enough to praise, and yet the hosts always come back around to directly or indirectly saying that they were too unsophisticated to have accomplished any of this without outside help, which is an opinion that they never seem to come to about European churches or castles or anything like that.
Clearly, someone told the local people how to place these stones into different areas.
So you're surmising the technology was given to these people.
The engineering knowledge, because this screams mathematics.
I will certainly concur to this extent. Someone or some ones had extraordinary knowledge here. This is not easy to build.
No.
The funniest thing about this show to me is that if you believe all of these guest speakers, and you think that 90% of the accomplishments of people of color were done with the help of aliens, and meanwhile we have Stonehenge and nothing else, doesn't that imply that aliens don't like white people? I mean, aliens were going across the globe throughout all of early civilizations and meeting with all these different people and helping them invent things and helping stack structures and building pyramids for them, except for us. What did we do? What did we do that made aliens avoid talking to us for the rest of human civilization? I posted that joke on Twitter, and a couple select people got really, really mad. So now, in my ongoing fight to make everyone on the internet mad, I'm officially selling Aliens Don't Like White People merchandise on Redbubble. Get yourself some Aliens Don't Like White People t-shirts, coffee mugs, blankets, shower curtains. Deliver this message to the world with the utmost pride. Link in the description. Anyways, y'all want to see some alien titties?
Within these caves are different murals.
We find some of the most amazing paintings of people emerging out of the clouds. And they're actually floating in midair. What a beautiful, poetic way to depict something that they might have witnessed. It was a complete misunderstanding of a visitation by technologically advanced space travelers.
If there's one word you hear in almost every episode of Ancient Aliens, especially from this guy, it's misunderstood or misinterpreted. Every time he talks about an ancient legend or a piece of art, it's the locals misunderstanding what they were really saying, which he then uses to circle it all back around to legends that he personally believes in.
I see an astronaut in a helmet.
I'm immediately reminded of misunderstood technology. It was some type of misunderstood technology, an extraterrestrial tool, because we didn't understand. Was it really flying snakes or gods that were snakes? Of course not. It was misunderstood technology. Now, of course, it wasn't a dragon in a biological nature, but it was a misinterpreted machine. They were misinterpreted flesh and blood extraterrestrials.
A flesh and blood extraterrestrial whom our ancestors misinterpreted as being God.
When it all comes down to it, it was all a huge misunderstanding.
To me, this is the equivalent of reading through ancient religions and trying to argue that each and every one was actually Jesus in a wig trying to mess with people. This is something that white people just generally tend to do a lot. Whenever we come up with our own folklore that is sort of unsubstantiated, we try and make it seem more legitimate by pointing to the cultures of other people and saying, look, they saw the same thing, they just didn't understand what they saw because they're stupid. This is something you see a lot in Bigfoot culture in America. Various hunters and locals will always claim that American Indians had stories of Bigfoot, but when you look into it, it's just some various mythical beast that has nothing to do with Sasquatch. But the Bigfoot hunters roll their eyes and say, oh, for the love of God, it was Bigfoot, they just didn't know what they saw. Our beliefs and our culture are one-to-one with reality, but the beliefs and cultures of minorities are skewed and warped because they aren't as smart as we are. This is, at best, cultural appropriation, and at worst, immaculate stupidity. I originally had a lot more to say about Bigfoot, but I realized that doing it right would just take up far too much time in the script. So if you guys want to see a Bigfoot video, leave a comment below, because I actually still don't know if it's a good idea or not. It is worth pointing out, though, that there is an episode of Ancient Aliens that claims that Bigfoot is an alien because the show is basically a parody of itself.
We can't rule it out as a possibility that Bigfoot are somehow an extraterrestrial species.
One of the most annoying things about Ancient Aliens is that the show is not only promoting pseudo-archaeology, but it's making it harder for real archaeologists to do their job. One of the biggest examples to me is Pumapunku. Pumapunku is one of the most mysterious locations on Earth because we really only have theories about how they built it or what it was for. But one of the main reasons we know so little about it is that people keep going to Pumapunku and just taking shit. And it's mostly ancient astronaut vacationers who are taking these artifacts home and probably destroying them in search of magnetic energy or dragon eggs or whatever they believe in that week. This is something they do in the show. They take an artifact from Pumapunku back to America and they start cutting it up with power tools. They use a laser cutter and a diamond saw, and it's all just so this old dude can go, wow, the laser saw and the diamond saw cuts, they look different from the ones at Pumapunku. Of course they do! Why would ancient Bolivians have power tools? If you're gonna take ancient artifacts home with you, that's bad, you're a bad person. But at least, put them in a museum or something, or put them on your shelf like you're fucking Frasier. Don't run around cutting up ancient artifacts. I mean, for the love of God, we know what kind of stones were used at Pumapunku. Just get the same kind of stone and do your stupid little science fair experiments on that. Don't go around cutting up ancient artifacts in human history in your surreal, stupid hunt to prove that UFOs are real. You're not Nicolas Cage, dipshit. This is hacksaw archaeology. This is backyardigans archaeology. I mean, this big-haired motherfucker has a degree in sports information communication. Why are we allowing him to run around destroying ancient artifacts in his ongoing pursuit to consistently prove all of his theories wrong? Another episode of the show features this guest speaker and blindly supports his theory that a group of mounds in Bosnia are ancient pyramids that have been covered up by soil. He notes that this makes them the largest pyramids in known human history. This is all absolutely not true. These are hills. They slope up because that's what hills do. So what this guy has been doing has been raising money to go in and reshape the hills to look like pyramids, which he calls excavating lost sites. And in doing so, he's actually been destroying real archaeologically important locations in order to support this conspiracy theory that he's essentially invented in his own mind. And the reason he's been doing this is because this not only has bred a massive tourism industry, but has instilled a nationalist belief that the people living there descended from one of the most impressive ancient civilizations of all time. Many politicians have supported this conspiracy, and naysayers have been accused of being anti-Bosnian. What Ancient Aliens really supports in segments like this is something that used to be extremely common, but is now actively fought against, and that is archaeology with motivation. People used to say that archaeologists around the world would hunt for the past with a pickaxe in one hand and a Bible in the other. And because of that bias, a lot of the discoveries people made in the 20th century are now being questioned, and it's being asked if we've lost key moments in history because experts have become obsessed with proving their own biases correct, be it a belief in God or a belief in an advanced alien race. And this issue highlights exactly what we should and shouldn't be doing with our history books. It's not a question of what we can disprove, but what we can prove with utmost certainty. Running around arguing that certain unlikely situations must be considered simply by lack of not being certainly untrue is ludicrous and a waste of everyone's time. And arguing that impressive accomplishments of foreign cultures couldn't have been accomplished without concepts invented by modern American folklore is just insulting. Basically, this whole section of this video has been a long-winded way of arguing, say it with me now, just because white people couldn't do it doesn't mean it was aliens. Look, Ancient Aliens was the thing all of you came to hear me dunk on. It's even what the thumbnail is based around. But to me, it's no more than a roadside attraction in the Story of History channel. Because it's child's play to get the past wrong, and History Channel has done it time and time again. But what's really impressive is to get the future wrong. Every single time.
December 21st, 2012. Daybreak doesn't come. All remains dark. The world has come to an end. Is 2012 the year the cosmic clock finally winds down to 0 days, 0 hope?
Definitely, some of the gods will return. There's absolutely no doubt.
So, over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be covering a couple additional topics which could have fit into this video, but would have made it like an hour and 10 minutes long. And believe it or not, right now I'm really worried about making content that people actually feel comfortable clicking on. So they're going to be fun videos. They're going to be sort of tangentially related to History Channel. And it's just going to be some interesting little side voyages. And the first one is going to be talking about 2012 documentaries, and this one is just going to be fun. We're just going to shit on these, and trust me, there's a lot of funny stuff in there. So come back next week, and we're going to be doing that. If you don't want to miss this, remember to go down and hit subscribe and click that bell, set it to all notifications, and follow me on Twitter if you want to stay up to date with how that next video is coming along. But more importantly, remember to go to that link at the top of the description right now to get a special discount just for you guys, my fans, at GlassesUSA.com. I can tell you guys with authority that these glasses are great because I wear them every single day, and I know you guys will like them too. So remember, go down to that link and use the code BLUE70 to get 70% off of all blue light lenses, which are intended to help protect your eyes from that extra screen time we're all soaking in right now. Check all that out and tell me what you guys think. These glasses are so good, aliens must have made them. Okay, so we've made it to the end slate. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to see more content like this and the video coming out next week. And if you want to see another video like this one right now, I suggest the video I made last year about Area 51 and alien culture, which covers much of the same ground. With that, this has been my Quinton Quarantine, and that's all you need.